Good morning, everyone. It's still morning. It's nice to see you all. I'm here on the beautiful harbor front of Victoria, Lekwungen-speaking People's Territory. Thanks for joining us today. I started off the day on Fox News, hoping to send messages directly to the President. But I have to say the news of the day, of course, is the Prime Minister's meeting with the President, which was a key topic of conversation at the First Minister's meeting that we held this morning. At the First Minister's meeting, all of the Premiers and the Prime Minister gathered to discuss key issues. A number of topics were canvassed throughout the meeting. One was, I would say, there's a consensus among the Premiers that the Prime Minister did well yesterday to baseline a new relationship between Canada and the United States, that there was a sense of a different level of engagement, that the President is respectful of the Prime Minister, and we were all grateful that the meeting went the way that it did, knowing how some other meetings have gone in that exact same office with other world leaders. So there was appreciation for that. A number of topics came up across the country of importance to British Columbians. The film industry and the softwood lumber industry were canvassed by a number of different premiers across the country. On softwood, there's a growing consensus among major timber-producing provinces that there's an opportunity for an agreement with the United States as one of the early opportunities to reset our trading relationship with the U.S. In particular, there's literally billions of dollars of tariff money sitting in a bank account that has been charged to Canadian producers. It is money that is notionally owed to Canadian producers, but in settlements is typically divided in some way between American and Canadian producers. So there's incentive on the U.S. side and on the Canadian side to get a deal. We know the President is doing a national security investigation into our timber. It poses no threat to Americans except for more affordable housing. And we think, certainly if the meeting today was any indication, that there's an opportunity for softwood lumber to lead the way in terms of opening the door again to concrete and meaningful discussions that benefit both Americans with cheaper building materials and Canadians with support for that, as well as growth in our economy. And so that was very positive. On the film industry side, concern was expressed by premiers across Canada about the importance of the film industry in their jurisdictions, and their hope that the Prime Minister will be supportive of the industry in his conversations and continue to raise them with the President. Implementation challenges aside, it's obviously hugely worrying for the film sector, and it's hard to imagine the President doubling the charges for Netflix for Americans and hoping that that's a winning political strategy, or cutting the number of films and TV shows that they watch by half or more. But regardless of that, the industry needs to know that the federal government's on side. And finally, a topic that may not have been immediately intuitive in terms of the events of the day in relation to the President was the issue of crime and justice. Premiers across the country raised the importance of bail reform. Doug Ford has been quite outspoken about the situation he faces in Ontario in terms of his concerns about public safety in that province. We heard premiers from the north, from the east, and certainly here in British Columbia. We have concerns and have asked for bail reform at the federal level, and it's our hope that the Prime Minister acts very quickly on that. My understanding is, coming out of the meeting, that the Prime Minister is still committed to the July 1st date to get us all together on internal trade, to remove those barriers so we can trade across the country fairly and equally, one Canadian economy, all Canadians working together to grow our prosperity and to stand on our own 2 feet. So that was the meeting today. It was very positive, and premiers are planning for a get-together, I understand, in Saskatchewan for Council of Federation and First Ministers. The timing may be while I'm away on a trade mission in Asia, but regardless, we'll have a strong presence there and be supportive of the key initiatives that we share in common with the federal government. With that, happy to open it up for questions.
Thanks so much for everyone joining us today. For callers on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. We will start with questions on the ground. We have Richard Zussman, Global News.
One of the things you didn't mention in terms of topics of discussion was national unity. We've heard this week from Danielle Smith twice around the way that they are changing policies there that could make it easier to have a referendum on Western separation. Is there any way that you can share with us how you see that playing out? And then secondly, Was this a priority for the premiers and the Prime Minister? Is there more that needs to be done to address concerns the West has around things like equalization? Are you worried at all about the increasing rhetoric about Alberta looking at separation?
Well, I won't speak for other premiers, but I'll say that British Columbians are all in for Canada. And here in this province, we understand that this is the moment for all of us to stand strong together, arm in arm as a country. And that doesn't take anything away from our reasonable demands that the federal government ensure we have access to the same level of funding, the same opportunities that Quebec and Ontario get, and the same level of respect. But the idea of separating here is a non-starter. I understand. You've got a couple of conservative premiers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Their preferred candidate was not successful in the federal election. They have strong bases of support for the Conservatives in those provinces. They're navigating tricky waters. But I certainly encourage them all, Premier Smith, Premier Moe, and I believe that they're on board for this, to work together for the good of the country, to hold the country together, and to push back strongly on any kind of separatist sentiment. When a Conservative MLA here tweeted out a separatist image of Western Canada approvingly, and that we would become a protectorate of the United States, I didn't hesitate to point out how dumb that was. And I think he recognized how dumb it was. He said he was texting while he was driving, which is also dumb. Take the moment to defend our country, take the moment to stand together, understanding that it can be more challenging in other jurisdictions, but this country needs to stick together right now. That's what I stand for.
Follow up from Richard.
Canvass two issues from the city of Vancouver. Mayor Sim says in the meeting last week he raised the issue of getting rid of the park board legislation. You told him it's not on the spring's agenda. Can you explain to the people of Vancouver why the province is not moving more quickly to help the mayor get rid of the park board as he has promised? And secondly, there continues to be a push from some in the Filipino community to have either a permanent memorial for the Lapu-Lapu tragedy or a community center, or potentially both. What are your thoughts on a community center or a memorial or both for to recognize the Lapu-Lapu tragedy?
I'll take the second question first, Richard. I think coming out of the Lapu-Lapu, the mass murder following the Lapu-Lapu festival, it's hard even in this moment to say that there could be something positive that could come from this, but I do believe that there will be. Both in terms of the capacity of Filipino BC, the organization that pulled the festival together. We're working with them to make sure that they have capacity to support victims, support families from the community. I think that will be a legacy that will live on for many years in terms of this organization bringing the Filipino community together. The Filipino community does need a place to gather. Our government's committed to a cultural center for the Filipino people where they can gather and celebrate together. And again, this is a moment where I think we'll see that as a positive legacy coming out of this. I will say on this topic, and it's important to note that in terms of organizers of summer events across the province, I know there's a lot of anxiety. Do we continue to hold our event? Do we need additional security measures? What should we be doing? I'm pleased to share that we have appointed Commissioner Chris Hinkson, who's a former Chief Justice of the BC Supreme Court, has agreed to act as Commissioner for our independent commission to do a review in a very short period of time to report back to government by June 30th on measures, best practices that are applicable, that can be used by community event organizers across the province to maximize safety, but not retreat from the fact that we all have to get together and celebrate. We all have to get together and have a good time. So we'll be releasing the terms of reference for that today. And I want to express my appreciation to the former Chief Justice for being willing to take on this important work, especially on the compressed time schedule that we've asked him to work on. With respect to Mayor of the City of Vancouver and his priority around the Vancouver Park Board. We are aware of the Mayor's priority on this. We've been working with them to ensure that all the ducks are in a row. As you can see in our legislative session, despite having only 11 bills, we've had to put 3 of our own bills over to the next session, not being able to get through them due to the length of debate that's been taking place in the legislature. And just to keep in mind, that's less than half of the number of bills we put through similar length sessions in previous agendas. So there are a lot of new MLAs. They're finding their feet. They're asking questions that they need to ask. But it has resulted in a reduced legislative schedule, and the Park Board, unfortunately, was a casualty of that.
Rob Buffum, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I wanted to get your reaction. Last Thursday, you made comments that the BC branch of the Canadian Bar Association has been critical of. They sent you a letter expressing their concerns. I gather the Law Society is going to be doing something similar, releasing a statement when you'd called the accused in the Lapu-Lapu tragedy a murderer, in your opinion, and that he should spend the rest of his goddamn life in jail. Their letter to you says that by ignoring the presumption of innocence and the requirement of due process in your public remarks, you give permission to others to do the same. Such action undermines the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law, and it fosters distrust in our justice system. What's your reaction to that criticism?
Well, I'll take a step back. Today, on a call of premiers across the country, our criminal justice system was one of the key topics of conversation, despite the fact that the president of one of the most powerful countries on earth is directly threatening our sovereignty. That tells you the level of concern that Canadians have about the current bail system, how our current justice system is operating, and what it means in terms of people's sense of confidence in the justice system, and also what it means for the safety of our communities. We have pushed the federal government once to reform bail rules. We pushed them again. We continue to advocate on this, and also at the provincial level, we're putting mental health services directly into the prisons to intervene. We're doing all we can at the provincial level. We need the federal government to step up here. As for my comments, I apologize to the Speaker for intemperate language in the House. This is a community that is very close to me. I feel very personally, personally people who are there, who are directly involved. I think that I have a stronger level of confidence in the independence of the judiciary and their ability to withstand my own feelings about what should happen to this individual. And I'll leave it at that.
Rob, for a follow-up.
Yeah, when we spoke on Monday, in light of the threats of 100% tariffs on film, you talked about what you hope to see happen in the meeting yesterday with the Prime Minister, and as I recall, you talked about an aspiration that softwood lumber would be raised. My understanding, you've said there's optimism coming out of today's meeting, but softwood lumber was not raised in the meeting with the President. Are you disappointed by that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there was a possibility of yesterday's meeting going in 2 directions. One being just a total blowout, as we've seen in terms of the meeting of with Ukraine, and the other being a meeting where the Prime Minister and the President come out and say we're starting trade negotiations, and we've talked about these areas already. Landed somewhere in the middle. I think it was a positive baselining of the new relationship. I think it was a positive establishment of mutual respect and understanding, and just the desire of Canada to get to bedrock here. What is your position, Mr. President? We just need to know so that we can move forward in terms of our own country's priorities. And so that meant specific sectors were not addressed. Bargaining around specific areas of trade irritation were not addressed. But that baselining is very valuable, and I think it went well, and it certainly could have gone a lot worse.
Katie DeRosa, CBC.
Premier, in terms of, did Prime Minister Carney give you any insight as to what happened behind the closed-door meeting, what wasn't in front of the cameras, that give you any hope that the tariffs that are now in existence will be lifted, or that there won't be future tariffs? Like, what assurances did the Prime Minister get?
Well, I don't want to speak for the Prime Minister, but my sense of his comments, both publicly and in the meeting and otherwise, mirror mine very closely, which is that none of us would want to be accountable for what the President is or isn't going to do. It's very hard to predict what he's going to do. It's very unpredictable in terms of things he tweets and then what happens, and the tariffs are imposed and they're taken off. Now, those are my words, not his. But the sense I have is that the goal here is to get to bedrock, to understand where the president wants to end up, and to get the negotiations done. And then Canada can do our work. We can do our work in British Columbia. I think British Columbia will be the engine of a newly revitalized, sovereign, growing Canada. We face 3/4 of the world population right out of our port here. We have the opportunity for market diversification. We have the resources that the world needs and wants very badly, and we have the people to make this all happen, as well as the clean and cheap electricity to realize that vision. And so what I see is a strong future for BC and a united Canada that's standing on our own 2 feet, but part of that is just understanding what's our relationship with the president. And so that's my hope, is that yesterday's, what I understand to be a relationship building meeting, leads to that kind of clarity so we can all move on.
Follow up from Katie.
In terms of the commission, will it be done in time for summer festivals this summer? So what's the specific timeline? And also, in debates, your public safety minister could not answer questions from Eleanor Sturko about how many police calls relate to mental health. Why does the province not have that data? Would that not help us understand best ways to respond to this through integrated mental health and police teams?
Yeah, we have pretty good data about what our teams do, but we have a patchwork of police forces across the province. We have municipal forces as well as RCMP, which makes it challenging. They have different data collection mechanisms, and they record their interactions differently. Vancouver Police give us a great insight into this because they do have quite advanced data collection. They've issued a number of reports about this, but I mean, I don't know if the public really needs to see police reports about this, because they can see it with their own eyes, what's happening in their communities. They know that people are in need of assistance. They know that they need that help. And the work that we're doing with Dr. Vigo is to identify, rather than police interactions, to identify specific people who are having those interactions, to target those individuals who are in the hospital multiple times a day, who are being picked up by police and ambulance multiple times a day, who are really struggling and causing the system and community huge stress while at the same time being themselves in danger. And so we're focusing on the individuals and collecting data about them so that we can target our services to them across the province. As for your first question, Katie. Oh yeah, so the commission is due to report out by June 30th. Obviously, if the commissioner has recommendations before then, we've encouraged him to share those. There are events that are happening between now and June 30th. One of the significant ones is Pinoy Fest that's taking place in Burnaby. I've been in touch with the organizers. They're going to go ahead. They're going to go ahead with a positive and inspiring rebuilding message. It's going to be a very significant festival, and we'll be supporting them with what they need to ensure a safe event for everybody. But we're hoping to move as quickly as possible to be able to get that information to us and to organizers so we can support them in holding the events that we all value so much in this province and doing it as safely as possible.
Vaughn Palmer, Vancouver Sun.
Hello, Premier. Indigenous leaders are asking the government to withdraw Bill 15 because they say the government did not properly consult them in advance as required under your own government's UNDRIP policies. What's your answer to them, please?
I'll be meeting with the Leadership Council this evening to talk about their concerns. The bill itself expressly says that it cannot affect our obligations under the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and it certainly can affect the rights of Indigenous people under the Constitution. That's the baseline, and the bill actually goes further than that to say that's excluded. The projects that this bill will be targeted at are one of two types. They're either projects that are things like schools and hospitals and other pieces that have been held up by things like a municipality needing to amend its official community plan before they can give us building permits to start building the hospital or the school. Or there's a ditch near the school that incorporates the Water Sustainability Act that holds the school up for 6 months. The other type are private projects which have significant impact on the provincial economy. There is no significant land-based project that takes place in this province that doesn't have direct Indigenous involvement. We're involved in a number of different projects with Indigenous people across the province. I hope to have more to share with you soon about how we're working together on everything from energy to mining to forestry, and the idea that that we would use this bill to override the very partners in these projects who are asking us to move faster to ensure that we're doing our part. I think I can, and I'm hopeful that I can articulate and explain those things to the Leadership Council, and we'll be able to move on. I accept that we could have done a better job sitting down with them in advance on the bill, and I'll take that message too.
Follow-up from Vaughn.
What was the rationale for not consulting them in advance? And since the government put through the enabling motion for closure last night, is it safe to assume you have no intention of withdrawing this bill as per their request?
Yeah, we're gonna canvass that tonight. Their concerns. I'm going to do my best to address those concerns. The bill was presented to the Leadership Council. It didn't go through the process that we've agreed to go through in terms of co-drafting with them, and so that's an area where we fell short, and that's something I can acknowledge with them and continue to do the work. The bill does explicitly carve out anything to do with Indigenous people. It can't be used to shortcut Indigenous participation, and we certainly not our intention to use that bill that way. And in fact, the bill carves that out explicitly, which is why we felt comfortable with proceeding, because that work happens separately, and the Interpretation Act as well applies. So there's lots for us to talk about with the Leadership Council, and I hope we're able to reach good resolution on this, because Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities across the province are looking for economic growth. They're looking for schools and hospitals to be built faster, and that's what we're all about.
Wolf Deppner, Canadian Press.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Premier. Thank you for taking my question. You mentioned earlier the Softwood lumber dispute as an opportunity, a door to reset trading relationships with the United States. Can you talk about the logistics of that? Would Canada and the United States negotiate a softwood lumber deal separately from any renegotiation of CUSMA, or would that be part of a renegotiated CUSMA? So, in other words, what's the sequence of events here? Does softwood lumber come first, then the larger deal, or is softwood lumber part of a larger renegotiation? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wolf. I don't have any opinion about what the format is. I just am pointing out to the Prime Minister, as were other premiers, that softwood lumber is a momentum builder. You know, when there's billions of dollars sitting in a bank account that is an incentive to both sides of the border resolving this dispute, when 1 in 5 sticks of lumber that are used in the United States come from Canada and from British Columbia specifically, and when currently people in the U.S. are paying now 40% more for that same lumber than they were before this first round of tariffs, and they're going to pay a heck of a lot more. Like, this is one of those areas where it feels like we could create some momentum for a larger agreement. So wanted the Prime Minister to be aware that there's support across the country for an agreement, that there's a potential of an agreement, and one that benefits both sides quite significantly. And I think and I hope they'll be looking for those kinds of things to create the momentum for a larger agreement so we can get past this.
Follow-up from Rolf.
Yes, thank you. Regarding trade, you mentioned that you're heading off to Asia for a trade relation mission. Can you talk about that in more detail? And I also understand that you'll be meeting with European leaders as well to talk about trade between BC and Europe. Can you sort of talk about sort of the scope of these negotiations and the scope of any potential deal coming out of those talks?
Yes, at this point, just broadly, I'll have more details to share soon, but there's two key components to what we're doing here. One is to reassure our existing customers. These are companies that are investing billions of dollars in British Columbia, that we are a stable, reliable jurisdiction that you can count on. We're not going to suddenly come out with a requirement that to use a certain type of ship manufactured in Canada, and that you're not welcome at our ports unless you do. Like, those kinds of things that the U.S. are doing creates great instability. And so just making sure that they understand very clearly that British Columbia is a stable jurisdiction, that we continue to value our partnership, and that we want to expand that work is part of it. The other part is we have, as Canadians, free trade agreements with a huge portion of the world, and so especially available through our port right here in Vancouver. And so making sure that local businesses, especially small and medium businesses, are able to access those trade markets. So, for example, there's a massive international halal food buyers and traders fair that happens in Malaysia. So supporting halal food manufacturers, of which there are many in British Columbia, Columbia and particularly in Surrey, in being able to access that international market, being able to access that in a tariff-free way because of our free trade agreements. This is the kind of work that we want to do. It's not just the huge companies. We also want the smaller and medium-sized companies to benefit from market diversification and access to global markets.
Les Lane, Times columnist.
Well, thank you. Premier Smith is talking about the urgency of a need for a secure energy corridor. I think the phrase is a guaranteed energy corridor. Anything headed west, obviously. What happens to BC's approval process if she gets that? And specifically, how would that work with all the emphasis you just put on Indigenous consultation?
Yeah, I mean, these are important questions, Les. I think that regardless of the level of government, federal projects that are cross-border or provincial projects, you got to have Indigenous participation in these projects. That's just the reality of today. And so any project would require that, whether it was a pipeline or otherwise. I think that, when I think about the energy corridors and when I think about the work that's available and that's ready to go, that has proponents, that has markets, that has everything required, it's natural for British Columbians to think of electricity. We have a massive opportunity to support Alberta in decarbonization if we can increase our electrical interties with them. We can support the Yukon with the same. We can support our own mining sector in expanding, reducing their costs and reducing pollution right through the Northwest with the Northwest Transmission Line. And so when we're talking about energy corridors, this is what we're talking about. We're ready to go. We have the customers, we have the industry that's ready for it. It also meets climate change goals. It also increases prosperity and jobs in the province. And I understand there's a lot of speculative talk about pipelines right now. And certainly there's a lot of interest in an Energy East pipeline of some kind. But for BC, the projects that we have ready to go are very clear.
Les for a follow-up.
You mentioned you were on Fox News this morning and you said that equated that to talking directly to the president. What did you have a message when you sat down in front of the camera about exactly what you wanted to tell him, and what was it?
Yes, so my goal this morning was to communicate to two audiences. One is obviously the American people, and the other was the American administration within the White House. It's the exact same that I've been talking to you about, that the goal here is to understand where the Americans want to go their own way and where they want to work with us so that we can make decisions for ourselves as Canadians about where to go, very much in line with what the Prime Minister delivered in his message. That's for the White House. For Americans, the message was, and the host asked me, like, do you Canadians still like us? And my message was unambiguous. We love Americans. We got family down there. We got long-time business relationships. Americans are welcome in Canada. We feel, though, like, a good friend is in a bad relationship right now. And it's hard. But we understand that that's the reality, but it doesn't change our feeling about Americans. And the reason for that is pretty clear. My own brother married an American. He's got American kids. They're lovely. And so many people have those personal relationships across the border. But also, looking around, we got a lot of tourists here that are coming up from the United States. And one of the dominant conversations that I have with Americans who are here, they always start with a very Canadian expression. They say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about what's happening right now. I feel awful about it. And I think you can see it in the president's approval ratings. This isn't about the American people. It's about the mission of one person in the White House right now.
Andrew McLeod, the Tyee.
Yeah, hi, Premier. Back to Bill 15. One of the responses that came out this week was from the Wilderness Committee, who said you are weakening environmental assessments, and they equated that with weakening human rights. So I'm wondering how you would respond to them. And along with that, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, Terry Teegee, you talked a bit about this already, but Terry Teegee said you may already be breaking the constitutional requirements for consultation. So I'm wondering how you would respond to each of them.
Well, it's not true. The government has put in place a stringent environmental assessment process. It doesn't, I don't know how else to respond to that. It's just simply not true. Any project requires Section 35 consultation. We can't get rid of the federal constitution by passing a provincial law. You just can't do it. In our own laws in BC, we put in place an Interpretation Act that explicitly directs that every statute, every bill, every law we pass must be interpreted in light of our obligations under DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and Section 35 Rights of Indigenous People, just to be so clear about what our intention is. So I've got some work to do tonight with the Leadership Council. I have a lot of respect for Regional Chief TG, and I believe that we're going to be able to reach some level of consensus this evening, and I hope to be able to do that because there's clearly some misunderstandings about this legislation, and I hope to be able to clear them up.
One more question from Andrew McLeod.
I'd been told that probably just once, so I'd loaded it all into that. But did you address the environmental assessment piece of it when you said it's not true? Were you referring to Terry Teegee's response or the Wilderness Committee's response?
Both. To the regional chief, I would say very clearly that our provincial law cannot override Section 35 rights that are under the national constitution of Canada. They just can't. And it's I don't know how to make it more plain than that. For the Western wilderness people, this work is about ensuring that major projects, including many of which are environmentally positive, that reduce pollution, enable us to get them built and reduce our carbon emissions in the province. So, you know, when we enter into agreements with nations and they want us to move faster on projects that are like our hydro or our electricity projects, for example, our clean electricity projects, you know, putting an environmental project through an environmental assessment process when we already have a number of statutes that protect the streams, that protect the fish, that protect the landscape and the ecosystems. You know, anyway, we can move faster and we can still have high standards. That's something we're going to demonstrate through these projects, and I'm excited to be able to do that. I think at the end of the day, we're just going to have to show, because there's an understandable lack of trust, given how Indigenous peoples have been treated by government over many, many, many years.
Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. That's all we have time for.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.